Good morning. I almost said Friday. It's definitely not Friday. It's definitely a Monday morning. It is the 26th day of February, although if you're in Indiana, it's going to be nice and warm today. High of 68. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm Mayor Chris Jensen of Noblesville. This is another edition of February 2024 edition of Mental Health Mondays. I am joined by a great friend of mine, somebody who has selflessly given of her time, talents, and treasures to this cause. Kristen Boyce, the owner of Pathways to Healing Counseling. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Mayor Jensen. The sun is shining, and that is always good for our mental health.
It's absolutely wonderful for our mental health. I was actually just discussing the other day the importance of getting outside and breathing fresh air, which maybe we can touch on a little bit today as well. The importance of that, and it is a beautiful, especially this time of year, to have some sunshine, some warmth. I was complimenting Kristen on her pink because it is still February, a month of love, and I actually wore red to church yesterday because I said it was still February. So, but today is another edition of Mental Health Monday where we're going to talk all things mental health, and we're going to talk all things communication today, which I'm really excited about. This is something I think we have gone through many iterations of, even over the past couple of years. With COVID, changed our communication styles and how we all get along. Just the fact that we're here staring at a computer screen, talking to the masses, Kristen talks about how different communication is. So we're going to dive into that in a few minutes, some tips and tricks on your relationships and communicating and how they impact your mental health. But before we do any of that, we must first breathe. And so we're going to do a quick square breathing exercise, and then we'll dive into communication. But I'll let you lead us through that, Kristen.
So let's just say if you need one strategy, you're highly anxious, you've got the blahs, you're feeling disconnected from yourself, from your body. This is how to come back online and come back to a grounded, centered place. Let's say you're highly activated, you're triggered by something, or you just kind of need a reset and recenter. This is the trick. I teach it to every single client. We square breathe. We inhale through our nose for 4, hold for 4. Imagine making a square in your mind, and then we release slowly out your mouth like you're cooling soup or cooling a cookie for 8. You want that exhale to be longer to get the full benefit of that deep breath. Let's do 2 together, feet on the floor so you're nice and centered. You're feeling your body in this present moment. Inhale through your nose, and we're going to hold, and we're going to slowly release out our mouths. Just kind of notice the difference. Notice how my shoulders dropped. I could feel the difference in my body already. And when you first start doing this, your body's like, what's happening? What's going on? It's because we're not used to getting that full benefit of our breathing. And so you want to do this regularly. So let's do one more breath. Big, deep inhale through your nose. Hold. And release out your mouth. Okay, this is how we self-regulate. This is an important skill that you're using every day, multiple times a day. If you're driving in the car and you're triggered, your kids said something or did something, or maybe you got an email or a text that kind of brought up emotions, we want to take a minute to pause, slow things down, and be in the present moment through the breath.
Sounds so basic, but it is so easy. It's something I practice a lot on myself. You stole my line on in the car. I do it all the time in the car with kids. I also do it. I live by my calendar. I'm sure you do too, Kristen. I know what appointments might be more triggering and what might not be. I know what's anticipated throughout the day. So I try to do it and practice it before I go into a meeting, for example, that is maybe going to trigger me or be more of a high stress conversation, just so I can bring my best self to that meeting, most regulated self. So it is important. It's great to model for your kids. I have 4 of them at home, little ones. We talk about breathing all the time. Even our little 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old next month. We breathe a lot and talk a lot about it. So it's hugely important and something. It's free and it's easy to do. So thank you for leading that exercise. So before we dive into communication, let me just give you a quick communication note. If you have a question or a thought or just want to say hi, the chat is available to you. We'll try to answer questions or respond back on the fly. If it's something that we don't have an answer to right away, we'll certainly try to get back to you. But please, this is your half an hour to ask Kristen, to ask myself, to say whatever is on your mind or just say hi. You feel free to do that in the chat as we go along. I want to make sure, especially when we're talking about communicating, that we give you avenues to communicate with us. I know I get a lot of texts, Kristen, you probably do too, or notes after the fact. People watch our show throughout the entire month, which is the whole purpose. We love when you're live, but also throughout the month, and send follow-up notes about it too. So thank you for being engaged with us in this conversation. So, all right, communication. I love it. I'm not good at it. I'm a work in progress. There's my vulnerability. Take it away, Kristen.
Okay, we're going to hit this hard because I am passionate about this topic. I like research, I like information, and I love observing conversations, whether I'm in a conversation or someone else is. And guess how many times you've been in a conversation where nobody asks you any questions? Have you been in a conversation where no one asks you anything? And you know how that feels, where you're like,
it's not really a conversation, is it? It's really more of a lecture at that point in time.
Well, like you have a friend maybe and you're talking and they're talking, but they never ask you anything about yourself. Have you been in those situations?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a new book out called Super Communicators, and it's how to communicate effectively and build connection. And the author, who is a journalist, did a ton of research. NASA, the FBI, marriage therapists. He talked to everybody. And he's like, what makes people a super communicator? And you know what it is? You know what the number one thing is? They are curious and ask questions.
Okay.
They ask 10 to 20 times more questions than the average person. And so this is something I've been observing in teens lately. They really have trouble like knowing how to communicate, asking questions, going back and forth. And when we say asking questions, it's not an interrogation. It's a genuine curiosity. Like,
well, I'm not questioning you. I'm asking a question to get clarification.
Exactly.
We talk about that a lot in our office because every once in a while, I like to ask questions. I try to ask good questions, but sometimes my team might be like, "Oh crap, what did I do?" I'm like, "No. I'm not questioning you. I don't know the answer. So help me."
And so that's helpful to say that and preface that. Like, I literally don't know the answer. Mm-hmm. And so University of Chicago did an experiment. They've interviewed thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people doing this experiment. And they had 4 questions that they ask people to build connection. So I thought what we do is go through those, and we're going to ask each other these questions. And I want people listening to practice asking their spouse, their partner, their kids, their friends, their coworkers. This is a platform to create more vulnerability, to ask and connect in a more deeper way. And research shows that these 4 questions bring people together and in a surprising way. Like, people think when they first start the experiment, they're like, ooh, this feels a little vulnerable. Ooh, I don't know if I want to ask this. And what ends up happening in the research shows that they feel more connected to this person. They feel even more connected possibly to this person than other family members, because these are questions that we learn a lot about people. So what are they, you ask? Let's dive into them. Okay.
I already asked that question.
The first question, we're going to start with number 1, is, what are you most grateful for? Okay. And I'm going to pull this back up in a minute, but so I'm going to ask you, what are you most grateful for?
Well, thank you for asking me that question, Kristen. That's the politician answering me right there. I am most grateful, that you are giving of this time today to have this discussion, but I'm also really grateful to have a supportive family, a supportive spouse, healthy kids, and a gracious and forgiving community that has put me in this job and allows me to do what I love every day. Now, Kristen, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're grateful for?
I am grateful for.
We didn't practice this ahead of time, so I hope that I'm just doing what you want me to do.
This is because nobody, when you ask these questions to other people, they don't have time to rehearse them, right?
Yeah.
It's on the fly. So this is how it feels when you're connecting with another person. And these are questions that you can help people learn how to have conversations. So what am I most grateful for? So many things, because I love gratitude. And I'm most grateful for this opportunity to do this job and be used as a vessel to help other people find healing. And I truly am grateful for my family. I mean, that truly, and my kids and my spouse, and similar to you, there's something so deep about that. And notice what gratitude does in your body. And what we know about research and communication is when we're in person and when we're on the screen, which is interesting, our breath patterns will start matching each other. So if you're with somebody that might have a lot of intensity, you'll start picking up on that because your pupils dilate, your breath changes, and your heartbeat and your heart rate start matching the person you're talking to. Did you know that?
Interesting. No, I had no idea.
So that's why it's so important to be connected to your body and notice. You might need to take a few breaths, and you can do it subtly. You might need to kind of put your feet on the floor if you feel like someone's really kind of getting amped up and you're like, ooh, I need to recenter. So just noticing when you're asking questions to not take on the other person's energy. You're not responsible for the other person. So that's really important as we're asking these questions. Okay, let's hit number 2. Number 2 is, if you could know anything about your future, you can know anything about your future, what would it be? And this one's a little harder.
But it is a little harder.
So if you could know anything about your future, what would it be?
And I struggle with this because I try very hard to practice living in the moment.
Me too. I'm unattaching from the future. So this
Yes.
brings us kind of into further.
Yeah.
This is about getting to know somebody. So
yeah,
think about it
I
like that.
think if I could know one thing, I'd want to know what my kids will be doing as adults and their path and their journey. I would love to know more about their path and their journey.
Okay. So now what I'm going to teach is a mirroring exercise and communication. So what is most important to you to know about your future is what your kids are going to be doing
Mhm.
in the
Correct.
future.
Yes, that's what I would like to know.
Okay. Now see how you kind of shook your head.
Yeah.
So I mirrored back. So you know, I heard you,
Yeah.
I understood you, and I care about what you're saying. You
Yes.
see how you feel when someone really listens?
Yeah.
So this is a really important exercise in mirroring back. What I heard you say is, this is the most important thing about your future or your kids and what they're going to be doing.
You
go,
picked up what I was putting down.
yeah. So then you feel like, oh, I feel connected with you. I feel safe with you.
Yeah.
So that's an important communication skill. So if I'm answering that question,
So Kristen, what is one of the most important things you would like to know about your future?
so one of the most important things also has to do with my family and my kids is that they are emotionally able to handle the ups and downs of life, and they feel deep connections with others. Like, I want to know, do they feel that? Do they have that? Because I know that's essential for our well-being. Did you know, this is the other statistic that's really interesting, that at the age of 45, research shows when we're looking at a 65-year-old, if you have healthy communication and healthy connections at the age of 45, by the time you're 65, you report having a high level of satisfaction and emotional connection in your life.
Really? So where you are in 45 really can land where you're going to be 20 years from then.
Isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting. Okay.
So I'm just throwing out some research. It doesn't mean that things can't change, but as of right now, that's what the research is showing.
So basically 45 is kind of a key inflection point for a lot of folks.
It is. You start becoming more of who you are. You start feeling more open, less guarded. You're able to kind of know yourself and communicate your emotions in a deeper way. You've done some work. So
I find that interesting because I would say, Chris Jensen 10 years ago would have probably been like flippantly rolled off that statistic. Today, as someone who's turning 40 this year, I do feel more of a sense of like self and self-awareness. And honestly, a lot of it probably has to do with, I've been very vulnerable. I've worked with you. I've been vulnerable about my own personal work and what I've been doing as an individual. It's much more satisfying. So that statistic is very interesting to me.
I love to hear that's more satisfying to you to be more self-aware and vulnerable,
mm-hmm.
and you know yourself better. And so you have a difference when you reflect back in your 20s to almost turning 40. Happy early birthday this year. So that difference makes an impact.
Sure. Yeah. I love that.
Okay. So we're going to hit question number 3. This is based on University of Chicago. So question number 3 is, what is the most important thing for a close friend to know about you? What is the most important thing for a close friend to know about you?
I think the most important thing that a close friend should know about me is that I am available and that I want to be a useful resource and a helper in their life. And I will preface why I answer that question that way is I think sometimes, and granted, close friends are different than not close friends. That's an obvious statement. But I think sometimes in my job, and I bet it's similar in your job, Two, some people think they're a burden to me. Like I have enough on my plate with what I'm dealing with as being mayor of the community and yada, 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 that, oh, I don't want to bother him with X, Y, or Z. That's offensive to me. I want to be bothered because I bother a lot of people with my stuff. So I want to be bothered. So that would be very important for my close friends to know.
Yeah, that's a big one. So you don't like if someone thinks, well, I don't want to burden him, I don't want to bother him. You're like, no, the opposite is true. I would
I
like,
would be more frustrated if I don't know.
yes. Okay, that's good. I like
Yes.
that.
So tell me more about what your close friends need to know about you.
Vulnerability is my love language, and I love deep conversations.
Okay.
And sometimes that can be it can be a lot for people.
Yeah.
So vulnerability, I swim in it. I love it, even though it scares the heck out of me. And that's where I find the deepest connections in my life, the people that I can just be 100% transparent with. So it's
Have you ever
important.
found yourself in a conversation where you're vulnerable and the other person just is like, oh, thanks for sharing.
Oh yeah. Oh
And you're
yeah.
like,
And it's
okay.
like, "Ew, I feel like
Yeah.
I got slimed on." You're like,
Like, no, you're supposed to tell me something bad about you. You're like, come
or
on.
just mirror back what maybe what you
Yeah.
hear or offer empathy and go, oh yeah, I get that
Yeah.
totally.
Then they walk away from you, you're like, oh, that's going on Facebook. Like,
You it is. Yeah,
yeah.
people have that much interest in mine.
Shouldn't have told them that.
Yeah, well, we have what's called a vulnerability hangover too,
Yeah.
where you might have felt like you overshared when you didn't really know if that person was really trustworthy. So it's important that you trust your intuition. The answers lie within you. These questions are important to ask your partner, your kids, your friends. Let's use some of these questions to facilitate deeper conversation than just the weather. And I think that's what we're missing right now. We're missing a skill set. We're missing these skills to ask inquisitive, genuine, caring questions so you can get to know someone and really see them. We all want to be understood. We all want to feel like we matter. If we don't ask anybody anything, they don't really, it's not a two-way street.
Yep. I love that.
So number 4, based out of the University of Chicago, how you build connections effectively over research. The last question, when was the last time you cried in front of another person? So if you want to screenshot this, here's your chance to screenshot the questions. Okay. And you can take notes. You can go back and listen to this episode too. So that gave you some time. When was the last time you cried in front of, that's key, in front of another person, not by yourself.
Yeah, it's funny you ask that. So I just had this discussion this morning with somebody in my office about how I'm not much of a crier, to be honest with you. But I would say, gosh, I mean, I want to say when we put our dog down, but that's been like 5 years. Surely I've cried since then, hopefully.
The hard one, isn't it?
It is a really hard one. I'll probably just use the one when we put our dog down several years ago. And I didn't even like this dog, to be honest with you. So I was surprised that I was overtaken by the emotion of it. But that was Julie. I cried in front of Julie. But like I said, I'm not much of a crier, so that's a tough question for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm learning you're not much of a crier. See, I'm learning more about you, even just in this conversation. It's hard.
I do cry when I laugh a lot, but that's a different type of crying.
Oh, I do too. Everyone's like, "Are you laughing or crying?" I'm like, both.
I know.
That's how it is. But losing a pet is very emotional,
gut-wrenching,
emotional, and
gut-wrenching,
very hard. So I just want to hold all the space and tender empathy for that. See, this is how we offer empathy when someone shares something vulnerable. So it's really important that when someone opens up about these questions, you're offering mirroring back, you're offering empathy. I just kind of modeled it today. You do your own style, but it's important to say, oh, that is so hard when you lose a pet. Now I'm not bringing it back to myself. I almost did. I almost said and then I was like, no, we stick with the person. Now there is a time and space where now we're going to ask me the question. And then you could ask, if this goes two ways, right? This is where you could ask the person, I'm going to set this up. You could ask this person all these questions and they don't ask you one back. And that can happen. Yeah. But you're making the effort. You're feeling good that you've put in the time to pour into somebody else.
Yeah. So tell me, Kristen, when is the last time you cried in front of someone else?
Yesterday. So yesterday we had show choir, high school show choir. I didn't get home till 3 a.m. And so I was exhausted yesterday. Yeah. I was crying because of joy, not crying because of sadness, because I was so grateful. someone said something to me very kind and very meaningful, and I was just kind of recalling that, and Kate was sitting there. I go, "I'm so tired. This is so nice." And we're just she's like, "Me too." She's like, "Oh,
The
I
flood
cried."
of
We're both
emotions.
like cried because we're tired. It was
Yeah.
like gratitude cry.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I had people like, "Don't cry in front of your kids." I'm like, "No, it's okay as long as you're
Right.
not making them responsible for your feelings and
Right.
you're wanting them to caretake you. It's okay to open up and cry in front of your kids. You're showing them it's okay to cry and let it out and process it."
Well, especially someone whose love language is vulnerability. It's very important.
Yes. And
Yeah.
connection is really built through vulnerability as much
Yeah.
as we hate that.
No.
But and research with the University of Chicago showed that the outcome of this, where people, some people said that was their soulmate and they just met him because they felt like they cared about them. They were getting to know them at a deeper level. People want to know you care. If you have a boss that never asks, "How are you? How are you feeling today?" We know through super communicators, there's three aspects of these super communicators that are really good. One, they know there's practicality in the content. Like, what are you saying to me? Two, they know emotions. How do you feel about it? Okay. And the third one is, and I wrote this one down, was the social. Who are we? Like social aspect of communication. Like we're kind of getting to know each other, right? Who is this person in front of me? What's their story? Everybody has a story. And to be a super communicator, it's important you're curious about their story. Who
Mhm.
is this person in front of me?
Well, one of the things that that I've tried to pride myself on is is not when not just asking questions and getting to know somebody, but trying to recall that later, and that's one thing I'm try really hard. And I'm not always perfect at it, but if I can try to remember, like, well, last time I saw this person, they mentioned that their cat was sick and making stuff, or their son was trying out for football or whatever it may be. And if I can try to, people I think are shocked that that you recall some little piece of information they told you at one point in time.
Yes. And what we know is communication, people are scared and feel uncomfortable and feel awkward because they're like, "Ugh, I don't know. This person may take," we worry about what the other person's going to think, feel, and how they're going to react. And that's all normal in the research. But what we found is if you can sit with that discomfort, you can breathe through that, you can stay with it. We know the outcome is actually the opposite. It surprises many people because they expected it not to go so great, and when they figure out, well, that went better than I thought, it gives you more courage to continue to be a super communicator, which is ask the questions with
Yeah.
curiosity, not interrogation.
Yep. And on the other flip side, share openly, share vulnerably. I've always laughed and said that I am an oversharer. I tend to tell people a lot of things about what I do, but honestly, it makes it easier for me down the road because there's not that many surprises for people. You're not holding something in that, like, oh, what if they find out X? Well, I already just told them about X. You know what I mean? Like,
The
and
front view.
people, yeah,
Mhm.
and people don't really often care about X. You know what I mean? Something that you think is deep or dirty or whatever, people are like, oh yeah, I've heard that too before, and they move on. It's your own internal fear of sharing that information or being vulnerable.
Yeah, so you're taking ownership, which is the other piece of communication. You're owning your, so you're owning your stuff, right? You're
Yeah.
owning your triggers. You're owning what kind of gets you hot. You're owning what when you overreact. You're like, "Ooh, I overreacted there. I got really intense. Let me take a breath. Let me explore, why did I get that way? Why did I, get hot when you asked me that or when you said that?" Because it goes back to looking at what lies underneath it. And that is super important when we're looking at connection
Mhm.
and communication. You got to be self-aware. I cannot express that enough. If you don't know why you're getting triggered by something, you're just going to continue getting triggered without being able to work through it.
Now, one thing that you mentioned here, you talk about asking these questions. Nowhere in our conversation so far have you mentioned that we typed it in a chat room or via text these questions. So, do you want to touch a little bit about, we talked early on about just the influence of modes of communication, which is not necessarily what we're diving into today. We're talking about super communication and, how do we become a super communicator? But can you talk maybe a little bit about forms of communication and how best to be a super communicator, what that
Yeah.
looks like?
Yes, so we have various ways to communicate. We have social media, DMing, posting things. We have texting, we have email, we have handwritten letters and cards, we have face-to-face, we have phone conversations, we have FaceTime. I mean, I could go on and on. There's so many modes of communication, and it depends on what you're communicating. Okay, so if we're going to ask these questions, highly recommend they're either in person, ideally, that's first and foremost, or FaceTime or a Zoom, something where you can see body language. Because again, we are co-regulating. Our breath and our heart rates are
Very nice.
matching each other.
Yeah.
And it's important that that's how connection is made. It's neurobiological. Literally, our bodies are syncing up, which I know sounds kind of weird, but it doesn't when you're with somebody because you're picking up on their energy. It's because you're picking up on their heart rate. You're picking up on their breathing. Your eyes are dilating differently. Now, if you're going to have hard conversations, I highly do not recommend doing that on DM, which seems to be the case for younger folks. There's just so much that can get lost in translation, screenshots, tone gets missed. We're missing a whole lot of nuance, body language, facial expression, which really is important in communication. I highly recommend do not do that. Sleep on it. Wait till the next day. Do not pass go and collect $200. Texting as well is not the ideal form of communication. Couples will come in and they'll read me the text exchange. And I'm like, there was no mirroring. So it's hard to mirror over text. What I heard you say is, well, you don't hear it. You're texting it. It's very hard to offer empathy, and it's very hard to get that matching understanding of what the intention was behind the communication. There's a lot of miscommunication when it comes to texting, social media, DMing, even emails can be really, miscommunicating. Sometimes we have to do that if there's, divorce situation and you're talking about the kids and the schedules and things like that. Email is okay. But for those that are not in that situation, ideally it's in person, FaceTime, having those conversations and not text messages.
Yeah, I'll say, and I've talked openly. Julie Jensen and I are very different communicators. I am a verbal in the moment. She is a deep processing, think it through, want to write it out type person. So we have been focusing on, we're not having hard conversations via text. If we have some questions, we may type them out and then put a pin in it until, hey, this evening before we go to bed, we want to chat about X, Y, or Z. And sometimes I'll try to do that just to give her a little heads up so she can deep process before we get together. But it's a challenge. It really is a challenge, and everyone's different.
Yes. And everyone has different communication styles, but we know through research, the most effective is face-to-face.
Yeah.
We know that. Now, if you want to write out your apology without making excuses or, well, that wasn't my intention, or, it got misconstrued, we're going to leave all that out. I always have people write a letter out, and then we can edit it. Then you can even verbally say it out loud to the person. Letter writing can be very helpful. So it depends on what the circumstances are. Sometimes that can be very effective. I like that, you can write it out and then you're more clear on what you want to say when you do have an in-person conversation. That can be very helpful, like Julie does for many folks.
Mm-hmm. Well, we only have a few seconds left here, but I love that practical application of today. And so I expect thousands of people all around Noblesville to be asking these deep diving questions. I'm going to walk into Bika Cafe shortly and people are going to be talking about their futures and what they're wondering about it.
That'd be great.
It's going to be great.
And I love Chicago for coming up with these so we can get more of this in the world. We
want some super communicators. We're going to put these in the chat too for people down the road who want to be able to copy them. We can, I'll have Robert get with you to get those, to get them printed out. But this was awesome. This was a great step in communication. Kristen Boyce, as always, thank you for walking me through this vulnerable exercise. It meant a lot. So thank you. If someone is struggling right now in a crisis situation, I always want to leave it with this. Where do they turn?
988. It is the super highway to getting some immediate help. You can call, text 24/7. There are clinicians, trained clinicians on the other end, and they are here for you. You do not have to walk this alone. I know it's vulnerable to reach out for help, and it can be the greatest thing you do in your life is to advocate for yourself and tend to your own hurt and pain. And that is the 988 call or text.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you again. Stay safe, everyone. We'll see you back here next month for another edition of Mental Health Monday. Thanks again, Kristen.
Thanks.
I love that. That was great.